Let's talk about one of the world's greatest mysteries. There's this mountain in the Himalayas, right? It's just over 6,600 meters tall, so not even close to the world's highest, and yet no one has ever stood on its peak. It's surrounded by these wild stories of cosmic energy, of time moving faster, and invisible forces pushing people away. This is the incredible story of Mount Kailash.
So back in 1999, this Russian doctor, Ernst Moldashev, he comes back from an expedition with some absolutely sensational claims. He starts talking about 4 Siberian climbers who tried to go up Kailash, and get this, within a year, they supposedly aged decades and died. He claimed that your hair and nails grow in a few hours what would normally take weeks. And of course, stories like that, they went viral.
So what is really going on here? Is there some kind of mystical force field around this mountain? Or is there a completely different story? One that's waiting to be told? Well, in this explainer, we're going to separate the myths from the reality and find out for good why Mount Kailash remains unconquered.
Now, before we even touch the myths, you have to understand why this mountain is so special in the first place. And the answer to that? It all comes down to its immense religious significance. This isn't just a pile of rock and ice. For millions of people, it is literally the center of the entire universe.
And what's so remarkable here is the sheer diversity of faiths that all look to this one single peak. I mean, for thousands of years, followers of 4 totally distinct religions. We're talking Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and the ancient Tibetan religion of Bon have all considered Mount Kailash to be profoundly sacred.
To Hindus, it's the home of Lord Shiva. To Buddhists, it's the abode of the deity Chakrasamvara. In Jainism, it's the spot where their first great teacher achieved enlightenment, and for followers of Bon, it is the very axis mundi, the connection point between heaven and earth. So, the main takeaway here is, this is holy ground.
Okay, so with that crucial context in mind, let's start digging into the claims that have made this mountain so famous online. We're going to look at the science, and we're going to look at the sources behind these really extraordinary stories.
So, the biggest claim, the one you always hear, is about time dilation. It's this idea that time itself just warps near Kailash, causing people to age rapidly, making their hair and nails grow at this supernatural rate. It's a story that's been repeated so many times, a lot of people just take it as fact.
But let's check in with physics for a second. According to Albert Einstein's theory of relativity, there are really only 2 things that can mess with the flow of time. You either have to be traveling near the speed of light, or you have to be near an object with immense gravity, like a black hole. Neither of those conditions exist at Mount Kailash, and there is absolutely zero scientific evidence of some unique magnetic force causing any of this. So where did these stories even come from? Well, they all trace back to that same Russian doctor, Ernst Moldashev. And when you look at the source, the problem becomes pretty clear. Moldashev wasn't a physicist. He was an eye surgeon who also made claims about finding mermaids, vampires, and, get this, telepathic superhumans in India. His credibility is, let's just say it's questionable.
All right, next up, another really popular claim is that Kailash is positioned with this almost mystical precision. The idea is that it's located exactly 66 kilometers from the North Pole and from Stonehenge, and then exactly double that distance from the South Pole.
But when you actually pull out a map and measure the distances, yeah, the numbers don't really hold up. As you can see here, the distances are kind of in the same ballpark, but they are not exact. The distance to Stonehenge is off by over 200 kilometers. It's a really compelling story for sure, but it's just based on inaccurate data.
Okay, this one's really interesting. It's the mystery of the 2 lakes right at the base of the mountain. One, Lake Manasarovar, is said to be sacred with sweet, life-giving water. But its neighbor, Rakshas Tal, is considered demonic with salty, lifeless water. So how can 2 lakes sitting right next to each other be so incredibly different? So here's the direct comparison. Manasarovar is a freshwater lake. It's teeming with life. Rakshas Tal is a saltwater lake where pretty much nothing grows. One has an outlet which allows water to flow out, while the other is completely landlocked. And that last point, that is the key to this whole mystery. The explanation is actually simple geology. Rakshas Tal is what's called an endorheic lake. It has no outlet. So water flows in, but the only way it leaves is through evaporation. Over thousands of years, as that water evaporates, it leaves all the salts and minerals behind, which just makes the lake saltier and saltier. Manasarovar, on the other hand, has an outlet, like a bathtub with a drain open, which keeps its water fresh.
No magic, just geology.
Okay, so what about the climbers? People report that as they try to go up the mountain, they're suddenly hit with these severe headaches, total confusion, and this feeling that some invisible force is literally pushing them back. What's causing that?
Well, the symptoms they describe, it's a textbook case of severe high-altitude sickness. At these elevations, the lack of oxygen can actually cause the brain to swell, and that leads to exactly these effects: intense headaches, disorientation, even hallucinations. It's a well-understood and very dangerous medical condition, not some mystical shield.
So, if it's not time warps or invisible forces stopping people, what is the real reason no one has ever stood on the summit of Mount Kailash? Well, the answer isn't about what's impossible, it's about what's been chosen.
Let's just look at the history. Back in the 1920s, early explorers found its steep faces incredibly challenging. But the real turning point came in 1985, when the legendary climber Reinhold Messner was actually given permission to climb it. He turned it down. Then, in 2001, after massive international protests against a Spanish attempt, China just banned climbing on Kailash for good.
And this is the powerful reason why. Reinhold Messner, who is arguably the greatest mountaineer in history, said that to conquer Kailash would be to conquer something in people's souls. He admitted it wasn't the most difficult climb, but he understood its true value wasn't in being conquered, but in being revered. So, after we debunk all the myths, what are we left with? If there's no time machine and no invisible shield, where is the real wonder of Mount Kailash?
Just think about it for a second. As a species, we are driven to explore and to conquer. We have climbed every other major peak on this planet, we've gone to the bottom of the oceans, we have literally walked on the moon.
And yet for this one mountain, humanity, from the world's best climbers to international governments, we all collectively drew a line in the sand. We looked at this peak, and instead of seeing a challenge to be overcome, we saw something to be respected.
And that leaves us with a final question. What is the true miracle of Mount Kailash? Is it some supposed supernatural force that stops us from climbing? Or is it the very real, very powerful, and maybe even more miraculous human capacity for reverence and for collective respect? Now that's something to think about.